Welcome to Talking Points. I'm Esme Murphy, along with Abou Amara, Democratic analyst, and Amy Frederiksen, Republican analyst. We are doing this election night, folks. We're not going to lie. And wow, what an election night it was, with Peggy Flanagan really trouncing Angie Craig. And also, really, I think the story of the night, Lisa Demuth pulling it out over Mike Lindell. Your thoughts?
Yeah, correct. So Peggy Flanagan, you know, I'm just going to call. I called both races, and I called Peggy because I saw the progressive wave coming across the country. Progressives have been winning across the country. The Lake and Riley vote was a problem right from the jump for Angie Craig, and despite a ton of money, it's a big win for Peggy Flanagan. It is also a pretty good win for Michele Tafoya, because it's Michele Tafoya ran away with that race, and she is going to like having a Walz-Flanagan person on the ticket, and that's going to be a big piece of the puzzle. I can't remember the last time we had such a competitive U.S. Senate race in the state of Minnesota. Switch to the governor's race, obviously, easy victor for Amy Klobuchar. No surprises there. But with the Lisa Demuth win, that's going to be the story of the night. That's a national story.
It's a national story.
Rarefied air for a candidate to run against the Trump endorsed candidate and win double-digit victory.
I feel like we should be, looking at Truth Social right now. Yeah. But I mean, that is really an extraordinary thing to overcome that kind of an endorsement.
Look, I think, those are the two stories. One, Lisa Demuth beating a Trump endorsement, I think, is massive. And then second is Peggy Flanagan continuing the trend we're seeing across the country with progressives winning against moderate and competitive Senate races.
Now we can turn the corner into November, looking ahead to this U.S. Senate race with Peggy Flanagan and Michele Tafoya. The polling has always suggested that Peggy Flanagan would not do as well as Angie Craig, that she would still win and beat Michele Tafoya, but not as much, which obviously leaves the window open. What do you think? Well,
look, fraud has been a story across Minnesota for a couple years now. It is the reason that Governor Walz dropped out of the governor's race. Right. Remember, he was running. And there's just no way to separate Walz-Flanagan ticket from that. So, I think from that perspective, Michele Tafoya is really liking her chances. Now, it's not a gimme because the state, is very mercurial on that, and there's a strong, DFL presence, obviously. But fraud is the story, and Walz-Flanagan, there was no daylight between that administration for at least the first 6 years of the administration.
Right. Look, I think two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that Republicans are excited about going up against Peggy Flanagan, and it can also be true that Peggy Flanagan has activated a base of people within the state of Minnesota and is able to ride a progressive wave. Remember, this is still a midterm election. The structural dynamics are the party in power is going to take hits. Donald Trump controls the House, he controls the Senate, he controls the White House. The sentiment of the country is going to be anti-Republican, and it could be possible that Peggy Flanagan very much wins this race in November.
All right, but it's also possible that Michele Tafoya could really capitalize on the whole fraud scandals. I mean, people are frustrated, they're angry. It's been endless. It goes on and on and on and on. It never seems to have ended. And she has been the lieutenant governor.
Right, and this is a national story because the Senate, the U.S. Senate, the Democrats in the U.S. Senate needed Minnesota to be a lock and a safe seat. They don't want to spend money here. This expands the map. Now they're going to have to. And this expands the map for the Democrats and the Republicans, with a real opportunity for pickup for the Republicans in a state that no one has looked at in 20-plus years.
2006.
Yeah, I think that's true, but it reminds me, for very different reasons, but it reminds me of the race going on in Texas for the Republicans with Ken Paxton in Texas. Obviously, different circumstances. But my point being, the party who should have control is now going to have to spend resources in that state to defend a state that is basically a lock for its party. I think that's probably also going to be true here.
Right. So Democrats are going to have to spend big time here to make sure that Peggy Flanagan gets that win. And obviously, Republicans are going to pouring money in because they see this as a pickup.
That's
a pickup that they never thought would be coming.
But rightful true, don't count Peggy Flanagan out.
100%.
And here's what I'll also say. Don't count Lisa Demuth out. This was a massive victory tonight. She's an outstanding candidate. Amy Klobuchar is,
Amy
ginormous.
Klobuchar.
She is Amy Klobuchar. That's all we have to say.
That's right.
But I would not count Lisa Demuth out, not for a second. People counted her out for tonight, and they have been proven very wrong.
Right. Although I do think that you cannot underestimate Amy Klobuchar.
Oh,
Amy
no.
Klobuchar is not going to sit back and take this for granted. I mean, that's just obvious. It's not
no
who
way.
she is, and she is going to put everything into this. So I think that's a contest. in
And
of
she's
itself.
got a treasure trove and huge name IDs.
That's right.
Right, and she has a ton of favors she's done out there. She's provided excellent constituent services for
Yes.
many, many years in the U.S. Senate, and all of those people have
A hallmark of her Senate
hallmark.
was statewide constituent services like no other. So.
Right. But in terms of the governor's race, I do think it's interesting to note that we will have the first female governor
I love it.
of Minnesota, which is really amazing, because
Yeah.
when I started here, there were so few women who were elected office, and it's just it's amazing.
I remember when I was the first woman Senate Majority Leader in state history, and people would say, this was 2011, people would say, well, what do you think about that? And I was like, I can't believe it took this long. And I would say the same about this. I am overjoyed we're going to have the first woman governor of the state, but also I can't believe it took this long, but we're going to finally get there.
Yeah, I think that's all true, and I think it is a continuation. Remember, Minnesota has 2 female senators at the federal level, and so I think it's a continuation of making sure we elect women in Minnesota.
All right, so now the speculation is going to be on, okay, let's say Amy Klobuchar wins, although we don't want to take Lisa Demuth for granted, but let's say Amy Klobuchar wins the governor's race. She obviously gets to appoint her successor. And who do you think she's going to pick?
I imagine there will be a short list, and I imagine on that list may be a name of Angie Craig. This is someone, again, who's been very effective in Washington. So set aside this campaign. I think it was a good debate, healthy debate for the party. The fact is, if she's going to replace herself, she's looking at who has the chops to get work done in D.C. It could be Angie Craig.
What does this say about Donald Trump's hold over Republicans in Minnesota? I think it raises big question marks.
Look, it has never been that strong. I go back to 2016 and the precinct caucuses where I was taking names and the lines were out the door, and I thought, oh my goodness, is this the Trump effect? Is this what everyone's talking about? And he came in a distant third. Minnesota Republicans will not be herded into or pigeonholed as Republicans
Clearly.
across the country. Clearly not. And that along with the poor showing of Mike Lindell at the endorsing convention was what I was basing, and also I just really like Lisa, basing my prediction that she would win tonight, and she won handily.
That's all true, but I also think it's fair to point out Mike Lindell is a uniquely bad candidate. I mean, the baggage involved with Smartmatics and the lawsuits and dropping out of his office.
But there are a lot of people he appeals to.
100%. He had
Although he did lose significantly
he
tonight.
had a solid floor and a short ceiling. Right? I think that he really wasn't going to persuade a lot of folks. He had a deep, intense support with about 25% of the population, and that was it. He couldn't grow to build a coalition to win.
How many people, I mean, how many newspapers or TV shows are going to have the headline of Trump loses in Minnesota?
Every single one of them. That is going to be the headline tomorrow. Lisa Demuth is going to be the headline tomorrow because what is it? It's a handful, literally, like count them on one hand, of the candidates that have beat the Trump-endorsed primary. Even in a state like Texas, Ken Paxton wins over seated U.S. Senator John Cornyn. And that was a story that played out over and over and over again. But that story landed with a thud here in Minnesota.
The fact that she can win without Trump is an indication that she may have broader support than just the MAGA base.
I also think in the Senate race, it's so interesting, and you brought it up, Abou, about the money. The fact that Angie Craig had way more money, 4 times the amount of money Peggy Flanagan, 4 times the amount of money, $4 million in the bank, and she could not beat Peggy Flanagan. Peggy Flanagan just gutted it out. I mean, how does that work? I mean, that shows that money isn't everything.
Money is never everything in politics, but you'd rather have it than not. And I think this race came down to a couple of things. One being the Laken-Riley Act clearly had an effect with the Democratic base. Trump's immigration bill, Angie Craig, ironically, I think voted for that bill because it made her more popular in the 2nd congressional district. The problem is it probably set her up to fail in this primary election with the base of the party. That's number one. And number two is this. The fact is there's a national movement happening within the Democratic Party. When you're out of power, when you don't control anything, you're trying to figure out how do you get back into power. There's a fight within the party. Peggy Flanagan understood that, captured that momentum, and moved forward, and you got to give her credit for what she was able to accomplish.
Does fraud take down Peggy Flanagan?
it's going to be the #1 issue. It has to be. There's just no way to ignore it, and it got largely and completely ignored in this primary. It got almost completely ignored. The only person bringing it up was Michele Tafoya in some of her commercials. So you can bet it's going to be if all Michele Tafoya needs to be talking about is that fraud and those numbers and demanding answers, and they will not be forthcoming because they haven't been forthcoming for 8 years.
Yeah, there's no question, would you rather be debating the fraud issue or not? Of course not. And now it's going to be a part of the dynamic.
I also don't think that Amy Klobuchar is going to get tagged with fraud. I just don't see it. I don't think that people see her as she's been in Washington. I know people will try that, but I don't think that's going to stick. I really don't.
And that goes to the argument Angie Craig was making on the campaign trail. Democrats, we need clean hands on this issue. If you are running for office in Minnesota statewide and you were a part of it, that may be an issue in the general election campaign. Angie Craig was saying, I've got clean hands on this. Amy Klobuchar is saying, I've got clean hands on this and I can fix it. Now it's an issue that will be reintroduced into the campaign. Doesn't mean Peggy Flanagan can't overcome it or provide a strong argument for what she's going to do moving forward. But there's no question Republicans were handed a token to be able to argue in the general election campaign that they wouldn't have had Angie Craig won.
Well, Michele Tafoya and Lisa Demuth are the two strongest Republican candidates I have seen in years.
Decades.
In years.
Decades.
Decades.
Really, decades. We have been wandering in the wilderness statewide for a very long time, and feels kind of good to get into.
In spite of yourselves,
we somehow wandered into a warm, cozy cabin with a fireplace.
But I will
burning.
add, this is the first time that Republicans have gone against the endorsement. So Democrats, since 2010, we have gone against the endorsement. We would have Governor Margaret Anderson Kelleher, Governor Aaron Murphy. You guys, for the first time, actually said, you know what, we're going to focus on folks broader than just the 2,000 delegates. And I think for them, that was probably a good bet.
All right. Well, listen, I want to really thank Abou Amara, Amy Frederiksen. You guys have been great, and it's going to be a very exciting race to November.
We'll see you in November.
Okay, all right. That does it for Talking Points. Thanks so much for listening and watching. I'm Esme Murphy, WCCO News.